let's look at the cultural aspect at the IT professionals. These are this slide, and I like this one, it's in Portuguese, right? But it really shows, okay, who are these IT professionals? What do we know about IT professionals? And the approach that I've been taking is the, in this area of research, is the cultural approach. You know that culture is very important. It's really a powerful concept that has been studied from many years, right? We have very important authors in this area of culture, organizational culture, national culture, and but there is this trend, right? Occupational culture. And culture is a critical variable in explaining how social groups interact with IT. And I like this study. It was an MIS Quarterly 2006 from Dorothy Leitner and Kenneth Kayworth, I think it's Ken Kayworth, and they looked at all the different studies that were done, but to that point related to culture, and they definitely identify that culture plays also a very important role of when you look at information systems research. So that's very nice. You know, that's again recognized that culture plays an important role in IS research, which is our area here, right? In this course is the Alex. It's all information systems research. So now looking at culture and looking at the occupational culture specifically. Let's define it, and the way it's defined from the literature is that it is the culture is identifying all these different ideologies, forms of expressing values, behaviors that are shared and common across within a group of people, but across multiple organizations. And this figure shows that. You see how we have the blue people are IT professionals, and they are in different kinds of organizations, right? And they do share the values and forms and culture from their own organizations, but at the same time, there are specific experiences and values that they share with the people in their same field, in their same occupation. And that is the occupational culture of IT workers. So when we started with this research, when I started with this research, and this should be Trident, sorry, the really the theory, and I know we have here doctoral students, which is why I also want to talk about, how this concept was evolved over time, how did we start with this? And we, the way I started really was with the research from Harrison Trice, this author from Cornell University. You see, it was a book in 1993. I still have the book, obviously, in my shelf, but it was a book, so it wasn't a journal article. So sometimes you find great theories from books, so it's not only journal papers. I mean, the journal papers will probably give you the citations, right? But sometimes it's the papers and the books. And it was a whole book from this, from Trice that talks about the occupational, the cultures and how they are formed within organizations. And again, here his field is well, he comes from Cornell University in a department of I think it's labor studies or something like that. So it's really all about workers. And when we looked at this theory, we identified the different Trice again in his book describes how subcultures form and are developed over time. It discusses the different group and grid dimensions, looking at the things that people have in common. I mean, understanding that there are things that people in groups will have in common, but also the things that will separate the group from other groups. So that's kind of like the group and grid dimensions. And group meaning what are the things that make us a group, and eventually that's what is going to form the culture. So this group dimension, which is what becomes really the foundation for the IT occupational culture, our ITOC that later on has been called ITOC by Tim Jackson and his team. I called IT occupational culture the full name, but you know how in the US it's really a trend to abbreviate everything, right? So it's ITOC. Yeah, I use the long name. I think it's coming from Latin America. We use long names and long descriptions and long sentences. And I keep saying, with the US, everything has to be short, straight. So ITOC, yeah, there, it's very simple, right? So, well, the foundation comes of these group dimensions. And you see here we have the different factors that will help us define this identity of any occupation. So again, remember, TRICE didn't talk about IT professionals. TRICE was talking about the occupational subcultures that are formed within organizations. So it could be any occupational subculture, say the nurses, the police people. And so there are studies. And when I remember when I looked into this, there was literature actually about police and nurses, but that's it. I didn't find anything else about other occupational cultures. And again, the approach says the framework identifies these 8 components of the group dimension. So in this initial study, what we did, and I like to say we because nothing is done in isolation. I am a person who cannot work just myself. I really need a team to work with, to collaborate with, and yeah, I was lucky to have a team here where we worked, and actually it was a NSF grant that allowed a National Science Foundation grant here from the US government that allowed us to conduct research and hire, research assistants and collaborate as a team. So that was a good thing. So when we started that, as we started with qualitative methodologies, as a qualitative research. And I know that later in information systems, we do a lot of quantitative research, but I'm happy to see that more and more lately, there's a little bit more of openness to qualitative. I fell in love with qualitative research because it always gives you more depth, right? More depth, and it's very good for exploratory kind of research. It's rich, but again, when you want to generalize, and especially if you are in a college of business, you have to speak numbers, right? You have to talk numbers, so you have to be able to say there's a significant difference, and so you have to get used to that. So, but again, when you start something, it's qualitative, I think, the route to go. And in this case, we went with qualitative, lots of interviews. I'm sorry. So we had interviews with regular employees, managers, and different organizations, and different long interviews, everything pre-recorded. And this was done again as a team, and then the data was coded, everything using TRICE theory, right? And the objective was to really first confirm if those 8 dimensions of the group dimension of occupational subcultures confirm the existence of that occupational subculture. Is there really an occupational subculture? And if there is, how those 8 dimensions are going to be defined, and how can be illustrated, right, with data. So we used a priori coding using these dimensions, and we identified, I'm just here giving you some examples, but things like that show some of the, remember that we're looking at the group dimensions. So what are the things that make IT professionals that they have in common, right? What are the things that they have in common that they keep saying? And well, complaints about that there's always so much work. If I wanted to spend 24 hours a day here, I could. And I have to tell you that before becoming an academic, I worked in IT for almost 9 years in bank, in the Banco de la Nación Argentina, right? When I was in Bolivia. So I had the experience of working in the IT field. And so that, I think that was also an important motivation for me to look at the IT professionals, because one of the things that I had in the bank is that I really worked really hard. I mean, compared to my academic job, I remember, working in the bank was just living in the bank. And granted, computers and systems were slower, but there was a lot of stress and work. Again, I'm not saying that we do not have stress as academics. Of course we do, right? But there was a lot in the IT department. And but yeah, this kind of I kept the system going. So there's a lot of pride also discussed by these IT professionals, but also things like separate the game from the others. Like, I don't want to babysit because people are always calling for help, but I would like to teach them how to do it. So there is they keep mentioning things like the users also need to understand technology. And I think, well, that over time has changed IT the users themselves understand more technology. But we also, in our interviews, we looked at perspectives from the users. What do users say about IT professionals? And there were positives and negatives. Like the IT professional gets right to it, explains it to me, writes everything down, really need that. The support, the training, he's great. He doesn't talk over everyone's head, it's because there's always this, know-it-all aspect. Or sometimes you interact with IT professionals and what I want is the system to be truly running, but I don't need this to call somebody and then they come and zoom, 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 zip, 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 the mouse, they do everything, like they fix the thing, but they never told me how, right? So that was a big, another aspect as well. Well, then just going back to what was expected in this initial study was to identify what are the dimensions of the IT occupational culture and what are these manifestations, right? What do we know about them? So first was the esoteric knowledge and expertise, and that one refers to that IT professionals place a high value. They really appreciate knowledge and expertise, about technology, about emerging trends. And I think that's well played on the different certificates that IT professionals have to obtain. So just look at IT professionals, and there is one research that actually says that if you want to motivate IT professionals, sometimes you don't have to give them what kind of incentives can you give to motivate IT professionals? And one of them is actually provide more training. Other fields don't really appreciate much the training, or it won't be the priority, but IT professionals could even choose that even more than a higher pay, because it is really about, if I can learn something else new, like a new training, like go and get attend a new, like Oracle conference. That's like a big incentive for an IT professional to keep them. Remember, we want to reduce that turnover. So again, the esoteric knowledge is an important dimension. Another is the extreme and unusual demands. That's part of the profession, and need for constant self-education. And that's very typical to IT professionals. The kind of demand of keeping us up to date in knowledge. Then we have the consciousness of kind, and that is the general talk of, we as a group, but also some of the stereotypes. And the stereotypes come in both ways. This consciousness of kind, I mean, we know that the group, it has we IT professionals work in that area and have to serve and work with the users, which is kind of like the other group. And the pervasiveness, meaning that there is IT people that will use technology in their leisure time, so working after work hours. And I think that's very common. And I always say, my husband actually is a software engineer, and he has multiple servers because he just likes to keep learning about technology, right? He like a Linux server and another Windows server, kind of playing now with the cloud, most of it. But that's something that if my daughter says something like, Mom, I'm hungry. Yeah, I just drop everything and I just go, right? Whereas I think my husband would say, wait, just I'm coming. It's kind of like this using the technology, even when you could be doing something else. It's like, okay, that boundaries, and there are studies on boundaries about that topic. So anyway, that was very strong with IT professionals, that they kept coming. Favorable self-image, some feelings of superiority. Again, that has to do with the knowledge, the abundance of cultural forms, language, stories. I mean, the geeks, nerds, all these shared jargon, and the clothing. I mean, just look at how people, but that became not only IT people, I would say, but very typical from the IT professionals. And we also found some formal rules and ranking that had to do with education. So these were the original dimensions, but I'm going to talk more now about how those were used to study something else. So that was the original study, very qualitative. We said, yes, there is a culture. These are some of the characteristics, but it was qualitative, right? So in the first quantitative study, we used the IT occupational culture framework to study how newcomers, new IT professionals fit and adjust, socialize to the IT occupational culture, and what of those characteristics become easier to adapt or to adopt, right? I mean, you are a young student, and you are in just getting this major, and then at what point do you adopt the culture? At what point do you you are able to become part of this group, right? When does that happen? So in this representation, that's what it was showing. At what point you become dark, like in this case, dark blue, whatever color is the IT profession. You are first just being acquired, being introduced to, and then you become the IT professional, which should be the point where you are actually super committed to your profession, where you are committed to your occupation. So that adaptation happens over time. And so in this first quantitative study, well, it wasn't quantitative really, it was a mixed method. So we started with a qualitative first, qualitative phase, and then a quantitative. So the qualitative phase was really looking, okay, these newcomers, they come, they are, in our case, this is literature of why it's important to look at newcomers, why new people would be important. I mean, why not just the students in the first year? And it's interesting because from the data, we actually confirmed that only people who worked in the field, even if it was as an internship, only those were really able to articulate the different dimensions of the IT occupational culture. So when you are just in the first course of your at the university, you don't know much about it yet. I mean, you can hardly sorry, you don't see that in your screen. Okay, so that's so we found that only those who had work experience, even if it was just an internship, only at that point they could better articulate the culture, or they could better express themselves as being part of it. So that was one of, first we looked at the literature and we tried to see, okay, let's look at newcomers, and we saw, in what year you are. Some of the research questions for that study was really, what are the IT occupational culture characteristics perceived among college students as they obtain their first work experience in IT? So what are those characteristics that they perceive? Given possible negative connotations, what are the reactions to the culture? So we were looking at the fit, and how are those reactions different by gender, and also how different those reactions by ethnicity, because that's another important aspect in the United States, that there are very few women in the IT field, but also there are few minorities. People from minority groups, ethnic minority groups. And then how do these reactions to the culture influence their commitment? So, if you look at the quantitative aspect, you see commitment was the dependent variable, occupational commitment. So in this mixed method study, it was more qualitative at the beginning, because now remember, we wanted to develop scales to become quantitative, and there are great papers that follow that process, and basically it requires multiple data collection, right? So you collect the first data set, just like 50 people say, and then you analyze everything, and you look for your reliability, validity, and then if things don't work, you go through the questions and semantics and language used, and change the questions, and run another data collection, and so on, until you get your instrument. So that's pretty much the process that we followed, and we ended up with a survey. And the survey was administered to college students. And as I said, the first phase is basically undergraduate students, and these are some of the demographics, right? And this was the data analysis for the initial phase, qualitative. These are examples of how some of those dimensions became questions for the quantitative phase. And some of the other questions that we asked, again, and I want to go and show you the findings and possible future research. I mean, those details are mostly of the whole research process, and some of the feelings that we found, expressions, right, from these new IT commerce IT professionals. And they talk about problem solving, for example. Remember the esoteric knowledge, we know that they appreciate knowledge. And they talk about this group association, where they care about what they do, the trouble solving, and that they like how users depend on their service. These are examples of the pervasiveness dimension. Remember that we wanted to know how pervasive is IT in their lives. But here we see examples of how a person from an ethnic minority group is, I'm really into watching and playing basketball. I'm into working out and jogging. I go jogging pretty much every day. That's not 0 degrees out when it's not that cold, and it was in New York, so of course New York can get cold. My hobbies have nothing to do with IT. It's almost all sports. But then a girl said here, my hobbies are not IT related. That's mostly why I'm not labeled a nerd. My free time is mostly going out and shopping, staying outside, not in the computer lab at all. So remember that once we had these cultural dimensions, we were exploring specifically those and how they are expressed by these new people. So and some of the conclusions of the first phase, again, students absorb a picture of the IT occupational subculture primarily from the pre-professional work experience. So before they study, now you can always, if you want people to understand better the culture, they should, in a university, probably create simulations, right, that will give students a better understanding of what really, what it implies to work in IT, right? So when they are just students without a work experience, they don't know much. That was one important conclusion. Another was there were some differences in terms of the women and minorities. The labels, I think there has been an evolution of those labels, but it's interesting how this kept coming up. I mean, sometimes you think that over time people don't express about those labels anymore, but they keep coming. I mean, we are in 2021 and people still say that if you are in IT, you are a geek or you are a nerd. So, however, I think that the positive or negative implication of that changes in some areas, but yeah, you're still a label like that. Some of the significant demands came, and then the implications of working of the IT occupation in other settings was also discussed. So the playing with IT or not playing with IT. So basically, we developed the scale, we developed the survey, different number of items, we obtained acceptable reliability. If you are interested in that original scale, that's actually the paper, the 2009 paper, right? So this is again a long research in IT and people. So that was used, and these were the results regarding the commitment. Now I want to just discuss some interesting findings in terms of the commitment. So affective commitment was the one that had more a significant influence by adaptation to the culture. So people who are really adapted to the culture will show a higher affective commitment. So they will stay in the profession because they want to. And if you are a manager, you want affective commitment from your IT workers. They should stay because they want to, not because they have to, right? That's the difference in terms of the occupational commitment. You know, why the types of questions here in normative is I stay in an occupation because I have to, affective is because I want to, and continuous is because I invested already too much time on it. So so that's like in a nutshell what we found. Now the whole adaptation to the culture is a good predictor for commitment. More significantly for the affective commitment, males reported high self-efficacy, and there are lots of gender studies that always show, you know, women show lower self-efficacy, that self-confidence. So that was also clear here when the studies the studies of the IT occupational culture. Males indicated that they integrated IT into their leisure activities more extensively than females. So that was also statistically significant. And new information technologies showed that with better adaptation to the IT occupational culture will be a higher emotional attachment as well. Enjoyment of learning and keeping up to technology and integration of IT leisure activities are good predictors. This one was about the the stereotypes of geek and nerd. So basically, those who show better, if those who show a better affective commitment are most likely to reject or ignore the stereotypes. And those who feel a higher degree of enjoyment with the challenges will also remain more for a normative commitment. So some of the final conclusions here are that there were significant limits of generalizability, mostly because of the type of population we had. These were in preliminary form, and they needed, so the instrument needed to be refined. More studies can be done to compare the different experiences that they have. More about males and females, maybe take a longitudinal approach and maybe do something about that in education. So let me, and again, I know I changed some of these slides, but I don't see the one that showed that one of the differences by ethnicity that I thought it was very interesting was that minorities had more trouble with the stereotypes, which kind of makes sense because, you know, as a minority, as an ethnic minority, you already deal or live with stereotypes. So when you see those stereotypes, you have to, you add another layer of stereotype that you have to live with. And in terms of gender, again, the use of technology in the leisure time was another difference. Now, the IT occupational culture framework was changed over time and was used by other researchers. One significant one is Rao and Ramachandran, it's from University of Texas, from in San Antonio. They actually looked at the IT occupational culture, but they looked at the conflict, you know, how the dimensions of the IT occupational culture interact with other managerial non-IT cultures, and which factors facilitate or create more conflict among these IT professionals with others. Now, another approach is more taking the value-based approach of the culture. And I like this figure, which is from Tim Jacks, again in 2018. And in this paper, he looked at he identifies the IT occupational culture from three perspectives: the artifacts, the values, and the tacit assumptions. And he emphasizes on the values, value-based. So the questions are not more about fit, but rather what is it you value. And it's interesting because this other approach on values, and I like this comparison. You see that my previous research compared to Raoult's and the artifacts, and here the values. And from this approach on values, he actually, yeah, I didn't put that there, but he actually followed this similar perspective in a qualitative study first and a quantitative. So it's again funny how these things evolve. And from this quantitative, he develops again the scale, pretty much the same approach that we used, but now looking at the values. And in this approach, a big project was born, which is called the World IT Project. The World IT Project, what Tim Jacks and Palvia was the chair, and Tim Jacks was the doctoral student. Now he's an associate professor at Southern Illinois. But anyway, what they did is they actually called researchers from multiple countries to use the scales of the IT occupational cultures with with IT professionals in multiple countries. And after many years, they collected data from 37 countries and obtained about 10,000 responses. And in terms of Latin America, Brazil, Peru, and Mexico were part of that. So there was no other countries, and IT occupational construct was one of the constructs, again, was part of that, but they also included other constructs like IT turnover, work overload, work exhaustion, you know, other skills. And this is, again, amazing because it's an amazing project that went over time. And the big question was, is the IT occupational culture really homogeneous around the world? You know, what are the similarities, differences? So this study can be done more and more. I mean, it kept growing over time. And these are some examples of publications here. And I just included some of them that are taking and I included the one that includes Brazil, right? That came out of that project, and Alexander is one of the co-authors. And there's another one. So there's a whole book now called the IT War Project about IT professionals with data from all these countries, and that book has book chapters from France, from all these 37 countries. So there's a lot going on there. And I met with Tim recently, and we agreed to that I will be working more on the Latin American perspective of the IT professionals, which is something exciting again. They are using more the Aspire values. So I am really working now in putting together an approach that will fit more the Latin American context. We talk about this with Aurora and Rolando from Peru. So that's one way. And again, I was hoping that by November I can have some drafts for you. But at this point, this is the work in progress. Recently, this is a 2021 presentation at the Academy of Management I had with one of my students, where we use the IT occupational culture, but for manufacturing labor force. Remember, I'm in a college of business, so I have a student who actually worked on that, and that was one approach that we are taking. And then the other one that is combined with the Latin American is really looking at the gender gap, looking at the IT occupational culture nowadays in 2021, and how what cultural dimensions are more difficult to adapt to women. I mean, is it the leisure time now or not? Is that still an important factor? How and what others, and especially which ones can influence this commitment and move to leadership, which is, remember, a problem. And for that, I am working with a team with Latin American researchers, and we just received this grant from the International Development Research Center in Canada to conduct this research with Brazil, Peru, and Bolivia in starting this year, 2021. So it's a 1 million grant. And I know that also the National Science Foundation granted this grant, where Eleanor is the principal investigator for looking at. And I don't know if they will look at the IT occupational culture or not, but we're really, but I think it's important to continue this kind of research, looking at IT professionals, how the things that we can do also in education and so on. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have. I want to thank you, everyone, and I'm open to your questions and suggestions.
Thank you. It was a really interesting presentation. I think this kind of debate is something that is really important to be done today. I see something changing. I believe that on the past we expected business people to understand what people from IT says, and I think now we are expecting them to be like hybrid persons. People from IT, especially the data scientists, I believe that they must understand from business, and people from business must develop some kind of data analytic skills and being data oriented and so on. And I'd like to hear about that from you. I think we have some cultures. We have some skills that can be developed when we put this kind of persons together. But for a technical guy, it's hard to really understand about the business. And for someone that is from business, I think it's even harder to understand about data analytics and then develop some technical skills that we must develop to advance our society. I think this kind of hybridism would be interesting to be seen, but I really don't have an answer about how can we develop this. So Indira, what do you think about this? Maybe it's something that needs to be developed when we start to study IT professionals too. What do you think about?
Oh, great question. Thank you. I mean, it's just a very, very good question, very relevant, because it's true. I mean, I think over time we thought we have already made it clear that business people need to understand more IT. But I think, I mean, this is really based also on a placement research that we've been doing with Michelle, is that the IT professionals also need to understand more the business side. And in that perspective, we see pretty much the new role. What actually Niederman already mentioned, that is what we call the bridgers, the bridging role. The people who are really able to understand the business and the technology and those bridging roles. So in this other study, what we did is we actually looked at all the placement data. So when the graduates, where are they? When students graduate from the university, where are they placed? In what types of jobs? So we saw is, okay, these some are placed in as system analysts, programmers, and all the different roles, and we classify them as more technical and more bridgers, where we see again some roles that have mostly consultant or system analyst, people who have to communicate with the business, these bridging roles. And if you classify those groups, you see that the bridgers are the ones that are growing the most placement. So it's really the big companies look for bridging, for people who are able to play those bridging roles, understanding the technology. So I think, again, it was clear already as business people need to understand technology, but we in IT departments should also emphasize that IT people need to understand the business. Yeah, so great comment. Thank you, Anna.
We have another question from some guy called Alexandre Gremel.
No, Indira, one of the things that I noticed, and in fact, the conversation that we had here last week led us to think that exactly what you're saying now, that we need to build this bridge. But possibly the easiest way of building these bridges is having having IT people that understand the business better. I think it's always easier for someone who already has a more structured mind, let's say, to understand the less structured things in the world than the opposite for some reason. And in that sense, I think that we should start developing in our students, maybe the undergraduate students that are the ones that we're sure that will be practitioners, what I call the view of the ego. They have to look at information technology and the organization as from a perspective where they can see it all. And that's possibly what was missing to previous generations of IT people that were too focused on the technology. But I don't know if that already reflects. I mean, we have already been teaching, at least over the last 10 or 15 years, we have already been teaching. I ask people, I shouldn't say I ask people, computer-related people with that kind of perspective. And I wonder if that is something that we will see changing the occupational culture in the future, or if you already see a trend towards that in changes in how we or how practitioners perform as a body, because they are already different to the previous generations of only computer scientists or whatever we were able to push to the markets.
Okay, yeah, I think it's a great comment. Again, what I can tell you from data is that we classify companies elite versus non-elite. So the elite companies are more the finance, technology-related companies, and those elite companies hire mostly bridgers, and they are also hired faster, because one of the variables was at what point you got the job offer. Before you graduate, when you graduate, 6 months after. That variable, and bridgers were hired even faster than the other more categories, job categories. So I think it's interesting your comment also about how IT professionals maybe can faster or easier understand the business side of it. That's a very interesting comment. I don't know, right? But I would like to say yes. But maybe if we have business people will tell me, no way, what do you think?
Indira, that was very common sensual in the sense that I don't have any research to emphasize that point. It just seems to me that it may be easier. But...
Alexandre, can I add something? I was having a chat with the coordinator of the data science course at Copiade, and I said to him exactly what he said. It's easier for you to understand from business than for me to understand about data science. And he said, no, it's really hard to understand for business because you need to go deep in the business and you don't have opportunity to do that. And said for me also, because there's so many technical issues and I need someone to take me by hand to show me the path that I must construct. So I'm really interested in about how can we develop this kind of path for business people, not only for the IT ones, because in some way I agree. He changed my mind a little bit because I found that I was thinking that it was really easy for them, and I'm not so confident about that right now. But for the business people to understand about data analytics, I'm developing a course, for example, about data intelligence, trying to show people that they need to be data oriented, but it's something that is under construction. So how can we put these guys to to understand about data analytics, to give them analytics tools that can be useful for them. That's, you know, that we are from a business school, so we are seeing our perspective also. Thank you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah.
Eleanor was here and raising her hand, but she disappeared all of a sudden. I don't know what happened. Anyway, so I would like to ask a question, Indira. What do you think is more urgent in the research agenda? What will have more impact? To make comparisons of occupational culture between gender or between countries or between other minority groups? What do you think has more impact beyond what's interesting? Just that would affect the business in a greater manner, depending on the conclusions you might get.
I love your question. Well, I want to say, just because right now I'm working with the gender aspect of it, I would say that because right now, if you see everywhere, there is more discussion about increasing diversity, you know, so I think the whole inclusion, you know, you've probably seen everywhere, right? All organizations are looking at how to talk about inclusion, add more inclusion of and diversity. So I think that is an area, but also we need to understand that studying culture is difficult, right? And it's going to be always this variability, right? But understanding what is it we can do with that goal in mind, which is to increase diversity. I think that should be the priority. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Violeta, you're on. You have a question.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Indira, for your talk. I just want to share some ideas because I have a teenager at home, and I thought it was interesting the way you put how young people are being seen in this context. And because we have now a generation of digital natives, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting because one day my daughter came back home and she was really angry, and she said, "Mom, they are calling me a nerd," you know. And I said, "Okay, but what does it mean?" And she said, "I don't really know, but it seems to be something not good, you know."
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see how this new generation is coming with these new concepts because
And yet it can be good for some people, right, Violeta? Like a lot of people actually wear it as a badge.
Yeah, I said, "Well, that's fine." And you said, "You are not a nerd," you should say. So what I think is interesting is just exactly the way the new generation, they think they know IT, you know, because they know how to deal with these tools for movies and for so many things that we ourselves, we don't know, yes, because we were trying to struggle with these new technologies. So I found it really interesting, the research you're doing on this site. I would like to hear more about it. Yes.
Thank you, Violeta. That's a great example, and yeah, that connotation, negative connotation of the stereotypes is a risk. And I remember, well, we actually, we another project we had as a follow-up was using inoculation theory, and inoculation theory has to do with pretty much preparing students for inoculation, you know, like a vaccine, right? So preparing students through training to deal with the negative connotations. So you see when somebody brings up, it's negative to be a nerd, you actually are prepared to respond to that and take the other way around. And it's like, yeah, well, not for me, you know, it's not negative for me. So there is a little bit of research on that, but I wish there was more updated because again, for me, I teach MIS, I do teach MIS and when I one of my I have one of the chapters that we talk about IT people. Of course, I have a chapter about IT people, and then one of the surveys there is actually, you know, what are the characteristics. I want just people in College of Business to talk about IT people, and they every year they still keep bringing the stereotypes. It's amazing. That's what I see, you know, over years, and that's not over, even though there are so many movies, you know, that make it like actually, you know, if you look at the big names in IT, they are the nerds, but those are rich nerds, you know, like if you talk about the big people on Facebook or Microsoft, I mean, yeah, they're nerds, but hello, they're rich, right? So it's like, okay, I don't care about that, but I can do good. So there's a lot going on about that, but not enough. Not enough. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for comments.
Renata, go ahead. Welcome.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Indira, for your talk. It was very interesting for me too. I was just wondering when I was hearing you about how do we reinforce these subcultures and this culture even in the very beginning of our degrees, of our courses? Because there is always a question in my mind that is something like, do we produce professionals that are a kind of very high, I'm talking about from the computer science field, okay? That are very technical and that are very focused on the machine and so on, the data sciences, as Eliane said? Or do we attract these profiles to our course? Sometimes I feel that the students come to the university from the very beginning just willing to control the machine, to learn how to program, to learn how to do data science, and they do not want really to solve problems. And then during the course, we reinforce it. We have a lot of professors that say, this is important. You must learn how to do this algorithm from many sides and from many different complexities and so on. And then just at the end of the course, about, oh, do you know organizations exist? And, you have to deal with the problems with people and so on. So that's the question. Don't you believe? What would be your recommendations based on your studies to try to alleviate these reinforcements, or should it be like this? I would like to hear from you.
Great question. I think that's a great question. How to actually do it, and I would say, maybe it's too much of a practical approach, but I would say give the students more of the real scenarios where IT professionals, because as much as you know technology, you have a lot of technology knowledge, you still have to interact with people, you still have to look at the comply with regulations, right? I mean, anyway, and regulations have evolved so much also that they require the IT people to comply with regulations. So even though you want the technology to work this way, you shouldn't, because you have to comply with the regulations, or you have to do it this way again because of regulations. So I think we need to emphasize when we teach students that as much as you interact with technology, there is a context that you have to work with, and that includes the organizational strategy, the people, and the regulations, all this environment. And a good tool to provide a more real life scenario is our case studies. I just like case studies because they kind of like, if you have a case study and you realize, oh wow, these are all these stakeholders and factors that I need to consider. So making the program run is not enough. Making the technology work the way I want it is not enough, because I have to, I live in a context, I'm not alone. And this culture is something that I didn't understand, because as I said, the new students don't really understand that until they start working in the field, living in that context. So discussing them, introducing them to what's going to really happen in the real world, I think that's a good way to go. It's like, let's go down to earth. Yeah.
Or maybe,
I'm sorry,
maybe,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. Or maybe conducting a kind of research study on the culture inside our degrees, with our professors and so on.
Oh yeah, that's a good point too. Professors, yes, yeah, you're right. Very interesting. Yeah, good point.
Before giving the floor to Alexandre, we have a question in the chat by Arthur Molino. And it says, I do have one question. After the world study, how pervasive, frequent is the cultural fusion on IT between different languages? This is by example, in Amsterdam, there are so many developers that Gamibaja is now a known world, also in Little France. So in other words, I guess the question is how much the language has been affected by this fusion, right?
Okay, well, yes, I just turned on the chat. So yeah, I think it's, well, I would just tell you that is just another manifestation to use different acronyms and names from, obviously they're going to be in different languages, right? I mean, I just see that as another manifestation. Now, exactly which ones they are, I think it's kind of like hostage, right? Hostage looks at national cultures. and they conducted studies in different countries. But when you talk about, say, individualism, one of the variables of hostage theories, some countries are more individualistic than others. So I think that's going to be the variation. So there is a jargon, right, accepted by the culture, but that kind of jargon or more jargon, that's what's going to vary in different contexts. So that would be my answer. Yeah.
You have to open your mic, Alexandre, otherwise we cannot read your lips. Your sataki
Aren't,
is
aren't
very
you good
strong.
read lippers by the end of, well, not by the end of this pandemic, but by the stage in which we are in this pandemic? Everyone should be good lip readers. We all forget about the microphone. But anyway, I was just here reflecting on Renata's question, and then she has, I believe that she has given us the answer. The problem with many of our undergraduate programs, where information systems students, or where students that we believe that should have a better knowledge of the problems before they came up with their solutions, all of the, or most of the professors there have been trained in computer science, and they want their students to be computer scientists. It doesn't matter what what program they're enrolled in. So again, if the professors themselves have, now I thought that we should teach them to have the perspective of the ego, but when the professors themselves have the perspective of an ant, it's impossible to build the perspective of the ego on the students unless we change the professors. But I guess that's possibly what, even if we thought about paradigms, right? And if we went back to Kuhn, he would say we'll have to wait before they all die. Be a little extreme here. It's a difficult task, Renata. You will always be rowing against the stream, the same way as I am in a computer in a department department that has an information systems program, but where most professors are or wished they had a computer science program or a computer engineering program or something different. So you already have the answer. If you don't change the minds of the professors, it's impossible to form different students. But are we able to do that? Possibly not. Not with this generation of professors that we have there.
Yeah, another option could be to add a course to the curriculum, right? I think some programs have those courses that are.
Yeah, but everything that we do is socially constructed, and if those that are constructing the new programs are the ones that wish the old programs, it's very tough to get. I mean, of course, if we expose our students to more content or more disciplines, more courses where they get a feel of the reality outside their small boxes, of course that would help. But what will happen to those professors that still wish them to have four courses on calculus simply because they still think that it's that they have to brand that course as an engineering course, for example?
You need to give incentives for the professors to retire, Alexandre, and then get new blood and get a more hands-on experience, right? Probably we are preparing our own exit here. For us, the young people, the young professors.
Hopefully for young professors that do understand that our society needs people that can connect, can build the bridges that Fred Niederman was talking about. By the way, we have to advertise Fred Niederman, as unfortunately we didn't have Eleonora here to pose her question. I think we didn't give her enough time. But Fred Niederman is also going to be with us in a couple of weeks.
Focus you gave to this type of research about different topics that really I didn't think about it. The part of culture and how you try to differentiate culture or group culture by the attitudes the different people have. Yeah, this is something for me, and I wrote it down because I think it's part of trying to understand how can you work with people of different attitudes, different culture, and how can you enhance one and the other, knowing how they act or what their strengths and what's their flaws. You can work on that and make it more productive.
Great ideas. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you. Now, for those who don't know Donna, we have our new president, who's a girl, and Donna is our let's say the best ambassador that we have had for ISLA and for LACAIS.
Alex,
because she has made Panama become you know, I mean, we're all for Panama now. Panama is-
Even though she didn't plan to, she's bringing answers to Panama.
well, she didn't know about that, but you know, but she will receive us there, and we'll all be very happy to be there in 2023, right?
Okay.
We won't let
Yeah,
you know
yeah.
when, because we don't want you to escape when we're there.
No,
Alright.
you wouldn't make me escape, Guillermo.
So why don't you tell us the next items in the agenda of the seminar?
Yeah, next seminar. I had it ready here. Had we agreed on that, Guillermo? But next seminar.
I know you would be ready.
But you know, well, I need my glasses again because otherwise I can't see it. Well, next seminar is about artificial intelligence governance and development for the public sector. Some preliminary notes, and it's going to be with Rodrigo Sandoval Almazan, who I always thought that was in the same university as you when
Who's
you were
that?
both. Yeah, when you were both in Autónoma.
No, but he's in
but
autonomous
it
of the
was two
Estado de
autonomous,
Mexico, which is different. He's an autonomous university of one state, and I was in the autonomous university of the nation, which is quite different.
but the name was the same, right? Except for that.
No,
No, almost
it
the
was
same.
not.
Anyway,
One's
but,
national,
Rodrigo,
the other one state.
so Rodrigo Sandoval is someone who has been studying, I would say, e-government for quite a while. Right now, he's not in an information systems school, so he's more like in a.
He's in a business school. He's in the business school.
Is he?
Yeah.
Well, but he's more involved with policies, and so he has that broader perspective of technology than those guys we were complaining about in computer science, and even in the business schools. I would say I think that it's worth you know, checking it. It's going to be good. Okay.
Great.
All right. Well, you do the thanks, right, Guillermo? You're the replacement.
Thank you very much. I think everybody found the topic really interesting and enriching. So why don't we give her a big applause?
Yes.
Thank you, Indira.
Thank you,
And on top of
Indira.
that, we have to, because she is our new president, and she is the first woman president of LACAIS, which means we're doing major breakthroughs. Congratulations, Indira, and thank you for the talk.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.